Around the Bead podcast, tire talk for trucking, mining, agriculture, and more. Your home for fleet solutions, aiming to inform, pioneer, and entertain the tire world in connected industries. Sponsored by East Bay Tire, keeping essential industries moving forward.
Welcome back to Around the Bead. I am your host, Joe. I'm joined by my co-host, Big John. And today we have a very special guest, Max Bitner with Rubbertrack Solutions. Today we're not kicking tires, we are kicking tracks. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Max, I've been really pumped for this. We've had a variety of guests on the show talking about ag tires and all different types of ag solutions, but tracks are really, really unique. And I feel like it's a small space that deserves a little bit more recognition, a little bit more information. Can you tell us who is RTS? What is RTS? What do you guys do?
Sure. Yeah, Joe. Well, first off, thanks for having me. You know, I love the content that you're producing and, you know, what you're trying to do for the industry, uplifting and sharing content and trying to fill that gap between fleets, consumers, and, you know, the manufacturers. It's a unique space that you guys are filling. So, yeah, first off, my name is Max. I work for a company called Rubbertrack Solutions. Track is in the name. Solutions is in the name. That's what we do, you know. Ultimately, you know, rubber tracks and tires are similar in that they're both constructed of rubber and steel.
Yeah.
And they're vulcanized. But after that, some of the similarities stop, right? There's obviously going to be tread patterns and that are similar. You know, fit, form, and function is going to be different than a tire. So Rubbertrack Solutions has been sitting in this space since, you know, about 2001.
Okay.
Our founder basically saw a compact track loader, which is basically a skid loader on tracks.
And who is your founder?
Jerry Von Grenigan. Yeah. So Jerry, you know, was in the tire business as part of a tire dealership, and he identified that, you know, wheel positions were being lost. You know, that, hey, that skid loader that was needing a replacement of tires is now going to a track. I don't have something to take care of the customer. You know, I don't have something to keep up with their uptime. And so he identified that, and that was, like I said, back in 2001 when, you know, 2 to 5% of what was coming out of the factory line was on rubber track. Okay. You know, everything else, you know, 95 to 97% was still on tires. Mm-hmm. You know, you take it today's, you know, model, 85 to 90% of compact equipment is coming out on a rubber track rather than a tire. So Rubbertrack Solutions identified, you know, that, hey, there's going to be a need for parts here, you know, and it's not just rubber track as a part, but it's as a tool to amplify an industry, you know, to uplift industries such as paving, such as construction, or even precision farming, you know. So we see the rubber track really evolved into something that's not so much a niche, but it is its own industry at this point.
And you're being a little humble when you speak of RTS, but RTS is, my understanding, is the largest rubber track distributor in North America.
Yes. So when it comes to, you know, broad range of products, broad range of industries, broad range of brands that are being offered, we do consider ourselves the largest independent master distributor of rubber track. So whether it's construction equipment, paving, farming, any sort of, you know, specialized equipment that's coming out on rubber track, we try to provide a solution for that.
And Max, what's your role at RTS?
So just recently took over Vice President of Operations. So try to remain humble. You know, that's one of our core values at RTS. don't have a background in sales and marketing, so hopefully
that's kind of why we invited you.
hopefully that puts a little bit of the misnomer about any information that I'm speaking about. It's more about the industry, our business, and basically how we can connect manufacturers, dealers, and the consumers, and uplift an industry, kind of sit in the middle and provide those solutions.
Right. So how long have you been with RTS?
So RTS was originally actually a DBA of a tire dealer, and it was always kind of operated on its own. I started with them, I suppose, 15 years ago. Worked various jobs, and through that learned a lot of different principles. How do we take care of the customer? What actually elevates the customer experience? What does it mean to be humble, right? What does it mean to have hunger? To actually have that drive to produce something of value for the industry, to produce something of value for the customer. In 2019, we incorporated Rubber Track Solutions on its own, and from there, we really saw a big flywheel moment. We created a lot of momentum, and that's when I started, officially just as, with Rubber Track Solutions. From there, we've definitely taken our bumps and bruises, over the last 6-7 years. And I'll try to keep this as timeless as possible, not talk too much about current events, but, just after we went to our own corporation, COVID started, and ever since then, it's been, every 6 months there's a new crisis that we're dealing with, and it's taught us a lot about resilience, and how do we have grit to overcome? How do we continue to stick to our founding principles, our core values, and actually deliver that value for the consumer and for the dealer?
I love that. That was
That's
great.
well said.
So pivoting a little bit to tracks themselves, where do these things come from? Where are they produced? You've got compact tracks, you have ag tracks. You guys carry it all. You guys carry the undercarriage too, all the parts.
Yep.
Just tracks. Where are tracks made?
So if we stick with construction track, that's probably the easiest place to start, right? So the raw materials are going to come from Southeast Asia. That's where rubber trees are. It's no different than tires. And basically the raw materials come from there. And at this point, there is not a U.S. domestic producer of construction rubber track. So basically, almost all of it comes from, China, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, anywhere kind of.
There's Japanese Bridgestone track?
Bridgestone, yeah, they make their track in Japan.
They still make a compact track?
They do, yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's a good one, too.
Yeah.
So they make theirs there, but basically that's, the raw material. So from there we take the raw materials, the rubber, the rubber compounding, the steel cabling, form it, basically in a press, and then basically everything comes from overseas. So
that's on the compact track side.
Yep, and that's on the compact track side. Yep, and so we sit as a distributor, so we handle the logistics part of that, right? Figure out what inventory is going to be needed for domestic consumption, and then be able to put those solutions into people's hands.
And then what about ag tracks? Where are those produced?
So ag tracks, there's 4 main brands of ag tracks, and then there's some offshore options at this point that are trying to kind of reverse engineer what those other 4 brands are doing at this point.
What are the big 4?
So you've got Camso, which is now owned. That's a brand owned by Michelin. You've got Trackman, which is owned by a company called American Rheinmetall. You've got Bridgestone or Firestone, owned by Bridgestone, and then you've got Susi.
Susi, okay.
Yep, Susi. So Camso is made right in the heart of America, Kansas. Trackman is made in St. Mary's, Ohio. And then Susi is out of Drummondville, Canada, and Firestone's made in Japan. So that's actually an imported product.
speaking of current events, August 2025, the two Japanese Bridgestone and Canadian Susi
Yep.
being heavily impacted by tariffs.
It kind of depends on who's reading what ruling, and
I guess is it affecting farmers today?
it kind of depends on which part. So on the ag track, Firestone they do have a tariff on it. There's just a straight baseline tariff on that product. We have yet to see any price adjustments on that, but I would expect something to happen. And then on Susi, I do believe due to the USMCA rulings, ag track is exempt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you own a John Deere 9 Series track, the T version. How do you pick between those four? I mean, which tracks and why?
Sure. First off, a 9T, a 9000T, it's an older model series at this point. I think John Deere stopped producing that in the early 2000s. And then, basically they moved into the 30 series and then up into what they call 9RT now. And, at that point, this tractor's got a lot of hours on it.
Okay.
This tractor is probably not your mainline tractor, for a major producer. It's most likely going to be doing tillage if you got that big, heavy horsepower tractor like that. And so you want to start looking at, okay, can we start narrowing it down from there? Who offers a track for that? Does everybody offer something like that? Is there a price point concern? Is there a performance concern that we need to meet? How long do we want to keep running this tractor? How many hours are we putting on it per year? And that'll start to qualify what you're looking for, a standard or a severe duty,
What's the difference between the two?
Typically it's carcass construction. So that's going to be, main cable sizing. And then the biggest difference, visually that you're going to see is in the tread height and then what they call the tip width of the tread bar.
And that's more traction, that's more wear. What is that to a farmer?
Yep. So what you can also look at is the pitching. So pitch is basically distance from one tread bar tip to the next tread bar tip. And you can start looking at that, and that's what's going to adjust your tractive effort. So how much traction am I getting versus what's my ride quality, right? So we can really space those tread bars out, but you better put your mouthpiece in because it's going to be a rough ride, where you can bring in, the pitch to a shorter pitch, and it'll improve ride quality, and it'll also it'll reduce your tractive effort, but it'll it won't reduce it completely, so you got to kind of find that happy medium, what truthfully is going to work. And that's where we try to work with manufacturers, do testing, let them see real world applications. Here's what we're building. How well does it work?
How do you test, and what metrics are you looking at to value the performance, measure the performance?
Sure. So when you're starting to look at rubber track and tires, and especially too, and you guys are in the tire business, you guys, I probably shouldn't speak about it. I've been out of it long enough, but you're looking for flotation, right? So how well, what's the PSI? How well does this stay up on top of ground? What's the compaction rating? How well does the tread pattern clean out? If we're in a really heavy soil, is it, are we turning this into a racing tire, which is really slick?
Yeah. Or
is the track actually cleaning out? So you want to look at those types of performance aspects, and figure out, is this the metric that's, going to produce a better track?
Are you seeing some brands and models perform dramatically better than others?
As far as rubber on agriculture still?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there particular brands or products performing better?
Yeah, like as far as clean out or hours or traction, where someone comes to you and says, hey, man, the clean out is my priority. And you say, well, let's start looking at these tracks.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think you can start looking at if clean out's going to be his priority, there's probably some sort of heavy soil or extremely wet conditions that he's going to be in.
Yeah.
And manufacturers will make products that are more specific for that, so you're most likely going to want an extreme duty track, and you're going to want something with a taller tread bar, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to make sure that, the pitching of that tread bar configuration is spread out to clean out.
Does a farmer have a bunch of options? I mean, everybody makes that.
Yeah, I would say so. You're going to have to get it in a heavier carcass package for sure. Mm-hmm. When you go with a lighter duty track, and you're looking for, what you're describing is what I would consider extreme conditions.
Okay.
When somebody is looking for that, you're going to want to go with an extreme duty track. Something that's heavy duty, like a Camso 6500, a Firestone Class 6, mm-hmm. a Continental Extreme.
So you those okay, and I'm thinking about the Firestone here. Who's been making tracks the longest? Ag tracks.
Ag tracks the longest.
I
don't actually know the history of ag tracks. John, you know the history of ag tracks?
Well, I know back in the early 2000s, we were one of the first Goodyear distributors for a while. And then Goodyear transitioned into Continental, which transitioned into where they're at today. I'd have to say it's probably Firestone or Goodyear were probably the original ones, if I had to guess. And Camso, I mean, they were pretty early on too, but I could be wrong.
Let's hear from the track expert.
Yeah, so the track origin story actually starts in North Dakota, the Red River Valley in North Dakota. Extreme conditions, short growing cycles, heavy-duty soils that don't dry out, right? Farmers are in there with a tire, they're stuck. Their growing window is shortened because they can't get into the field to plant, they can't get into the field to harvest, right? And so Caterpillar came out with their Challenger line of tractors actually in the late 80s. And they were actually, I believe, the original agriculture rubber track company, which at the time it would have been Camoplast, basically took over production of that factory, and Caterpillar got out of it. So Caterpillar was the originator, really. So Camoplast took that over, and I couldn't tell you the dates. It would have been somewhere in the mid to late 90s. And I think that's about when Goodyear also got into it.
Yeah, then Camoplast sold out to Camso, correct?
Yeah, so there was actually a merger and acquisition with Solid Eel. Yeah, so Camoplast Solid Eel became Camso, and that's still the brand that we know today.
Yeah. I'm curious, who's made the most advancements on technology?
That's a good question. So when it comes to OEM capabilities, I think that's kind of where you look at it. From the original, what they call the flat track Challenger, the model 65 through 95, which they phased out in 2000, the early 2000s. And then, came out with the big MT800 that they got now. You really got to look at John Deere. John Deere is pushing that industry forward. They recently came out with their 8RX, the 9RX. But you've also got Case. Case New Holland, they make some really great equipment as well. And, I think just earlier this week, they announced a new model, a 785. It's like close to 900 horsepower.
Wow.
So now when you talk about a rubber track going on a 900 horsepower out of the factory piece of equipment, you need some severe engineering to make sure that that track is going to hold up to that. You know, that's some serious torque. You know, as far as, you know, when it comes to that track, the track is going to be the fuse, right? So something in that system has got to let go, you know, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be the track. And that's probably what you want. You don't want it to be an engine or a transmission or something like that. But track manufacturers have to work to basically build something that's going to hold up to that type of abuse.
So when you have that kind of torque with that horsepower, is it the guide lugs that usually give out, or is it the lugs?
So on that, it's going to be a positive drive system, and it's going to be, you know, the drive lugs.
Well, for our viewers out there, what's a positive drive system?
Yeah, so that's also
And
a great.
for me.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So if you look at any of the tractors that Case is building, if you look at, you know, any of the newer model John Deere's, the 9RX, the 8RX, basically on the inside of the track, there's, you know, basically drive lugs, and they positively engage with what looks kind of like a squirrel cage. So there's basically a drive wheel that engages the track and propels it forward.
And that's versus a friction drive, which is what?
So friction drive is, think of the rubber track as a rubber band, right? Or like a belt. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's kind of a common term as people refer to them as a belt. And basically you're taking that rubber track and you're stretching it tight over, you know, a drive wheel and an idler, and you're basically pulling it tight, and it's actually friction between that drive wheel and the rubber track. So it's rubber on rubber that actually moves it forward.
That's a great metaphor. I like that one. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. With that said, how important do the drive wheels and the bogie wheels and idler wheels all play a part in that preventive maintenance of that track lasting?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Yeah, 100%. I mean, a track system has to be maintained. You know, I would say that anybody that's, you know, a prospective track customer, you know, you're looking at a piece of equipment, there's a little bit of upfront cost just in the maintenance side of it, right? And that turns some people off, but it's also, you know, hey, if we're going to be having a piece of equipment, it's only going to last if we take care of it, you know? And so,
How much cost?
You know, there's an upfront cost of.
This is like before you start using the track? Or you mean just as a cost associated with maintaining the track?
I think both, Joe. That's also a good question. So, the machine is going to go for more value, right? You know, the rubber track increases the value of the tractor, and it's going to cost more, but there's generally a little bit more maintenance cost over a tire, you know, just because, as John was asking about the bogie wheels, the mid rollers, the idler, the drive wheel, you know, there's just more moving components there. There's more grease points. With that, there's, you know, just a little bit more that you got to pay attention to. And, say if you've got a mid roller that's missing rubber or polyurethane, that's going to be an issue, because now you've got, you know, basically you've got a metal surface on a rubber track. You're going to wear out basically the inside of that rubber track, you know. So maintenance is definitely a must. We do see some issues with lack of maintenance, but you know, it can be remedied.
So what can a farmer expect from a maintenance perspective? Use a 8RX example. What type of investment do they need to put in the maintenance of all that undercarriage?
That is a good question. Let me think about that for a second. You know, you've got tracks that have a value. You have, you know, on that one, it's just idlers and bogey wheels, basically, that make up the undercarriage. As long as you're not running them down the road and getting them really hot, they're going to last longer than you think, you know. But if you're going to go beyond the weight and load chart, you know, you might tear something up, and you're going to probably have to pay for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're here on a show about tires, you know, talking about tracks. Tires have a certain amount of variance in the load and weight chart, right? I don't know. Manufacturers won't tell you that, but there's, say, a 10% variance that, you know, you go a little bit heavier, you go a little bit faster. Take that 8RX, for example. Mm-hmm. If it says 54,000 pounds at, you know, 19 mile an hour, that doesn't mean 20. You know, that doesn't mean 55,000 pounds. You know, you really got to make sure that you're weighing the tractor with the implement, and then obeying speed.
Right.
So, especially just going down the road primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a typical rule of thumb on, you know, every other track replacement or every track replacement, we need to replace components of the undercarriage? Is there a rule of thumb on that, or is it just based on wear and tear? I go back to, you know, when I was a little bit more involved in track sales in the early 2000s, a lot of people never thought of their undercarriage. It was get me a track, put it on. And I think we've seen a lot of, you know, what we thought at that time were adjustment issues, which were really not adjustment issues. It was lack of preventive maintenance. Is there a rule of thumb in today's world that says, hey, look, you really should replace this stuff, you know, every so often? Is there a rule of thumb on that?
You know, that's a good question. I would say refer to the, you know, basically the equipment guidebook, you know, and just, you know, what does the manufacturer recommend that way? Is there a rule of thumb? No. You know, we do see some people when they're replacing a track, they're going to buy a set of bogey wheels. You know, just, you know, a track is an investment, you know, and you want to get the most out of your investment, and that's actually how you know, deliver the value. And so it seems like a, you know, fairly inexpensive way to drive a little bit more value. And hey, if I'm already got it in the shop, if I've got it torn down already, why wouldn't I? You know, take off the 8 bolts and put 8, you know, put.
Why
a
wouldn't
new
you
wheel.
replace a valve stem and an air tire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can. I don't know that there's that, but any, you know, just like a tire, chipping, chunking, you know, cuts, tears, anything like that. That's just good rule of thumb to replace it.
So, Max, you sell ag tracks, compact tracks across North America. How big is the ag track market today?
The ag track market, as far as say like replacement units or just
Replacement units or dollars?
You know, replacement units, I gotta think you're somewhere between 12 and 13,000 units or so, you know, being replaced yearly. That could be a little bit of a high estimate. So you're looking at, and maybe between, you know, OEM and aftermarket, you're probably looking at you know, $350-400 million industry.
Include ag or including compact? Not compact.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was just ag.
Just ag. I can see that. I had it at 250, you know, in there, but yeah, 350.
You could be closer. Yeah. I was just making a guess.
That's a good guess.
Yeah.
So of that, the replacement market, where are tracks succeeding the most? Like what's their niche? Where are they doing really well?
Yeah. So on ag, you know, I think it originally started as a niche. You know, I think anybody that, you know, it was just something to try, right? You know, now a consumer, a producer of these products, you know, somebody that's growing, you know, vegetables, grains, you know, any sort of these you know, farming products, right? I don't think it's so much a niche anymore. I think anybody that values efficiency, that values productivity, that values performance of equipment, and that's really looking to increase their yield, essentially lower input costs as well.
Yeah.
Tracks are a good option. Now there's certain instances I would say not great option. Just if you got 70 miles in between fields, probably not a great option.
So niche may not be the best word. I mean, bias tires still exist. They still have a huge amount of them out there. They have their place in the market that the market wants them. Say in my world in vineyard farming, you don't see a lot of tracks out there, and that's for a lot of different reasons. Where do tracks do really well? Where are they really popular?
Yeah, so we see a lot of the vegetable farmers out here in California.
Yeah.
They do. This is actually the largest track population in the United States.
Yeah.
Basically west of the Sierra Nevadas. We see a lot of guys that are doing, grains in the Midwest, soybeans, corn. They do very well. You get down into just, north of here, there's rice fields. You got down in the Mississippi Delta, so like Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi. You got rice fields down there as well. One thing we haven't talked about is earth moving.
Yeah.
That's the pull behind scraper. You want to increase your cycle time. You want to increase your productive output of equipment. You want to get into a little bit rougher terrain. Scraper tractor is an awesome option.
Huge. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's influencing the West's population for tracks is that Case Quadtrac. I mean, I see it out there moving dirt in dairies for residential. It doesn't matter what it is. It seems like if you want to move dirt fast, you move it on a Quadtrac.
Joseph mentioned Quadtracs. How big of a part of that played in the versatility of track machines? We didn't see Quadtracs, a lot of them anyways.
It's a good question. Why four tracks?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different reasons, and I'm probably not the biggest gearhead to talk about the difference between like a 2-track and a 4-track system. I think it gives you extended footprint, and now you can go into a wider track. So you've increased the versatility. A lot of those are center articulated, so now you've got increased mobility as well. They work, I think, is the reason behind it. So,
do you see them taking more positions away from dual tracks machines?
I think in a heavy tillage application in earth moving, definitely. When it comes to like row crop applications or something like that, not so much. Just because to make one of those machines, they're just so big, they're so heavy.
Yeah.
Deere's got the 8RX, which is, it's not it's a fixed frame tractor. It's not a center articulated tractor, and it's a lot for a track system to handle. It's a lot going on there, when you get to a narrower track.
You talked about California being one of the largest track markets in the U.S. When we started seeing track machines really start to, come into the market in the early 2000s, by 2010, you drive up and down the Central Valley or the North or Central Coast, there's track machines everywhere. Has that market grown or is it reduced over the last, say, 6-7 years, in your opinion?
As far as just track population, I think it's grown. Once you get up into a 7, 8, 9 series tractor, there's a lot of advantages to a track versus a tire. When you're in vegetables, compaction's a big issue.
Yeah.
You want to provide that vegetable the best bed to grow and come up out of the ground. To do that with a tire, not to say it can't be done. I think that's why we see that track market growing. At a certain point, you're going to see a leveling off because in certain applications it doesn't work, in some it works very well,
Go ahead.
What's next for tracks?
As far as technology,
Could be anything. I mean, you guys have your distribution across North America. They have their place in the market. There are diehard track fans out there. The OEM market is increasing, as you said. John Deere and Case continue to invest in those machines. What is next for tracks? Is it technology advancement? Is it changeovers? Where do you see tracks 5 years, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think at a certain point, I talked about tires having a certain level of variance, right? There's you can go just a little bit over, with a track you can't. And the reason behind that is kind of technology. Rubber can only do what rubber can do.
Yeah.
If you start running that rubber at a certain speed, it's going to generate heat. That heat is the number one enemy of a rubber product. At a certain point, we're going to have to figure out either a rubber compound or, some sort of, polymer or something that can help minimize that heat or basically increase that the heat rating on the track, basically so you don't get the reversion. The equipment's getting bigger.
Yeah.
People don't want to. They want to go as fast as they can, right? Mm-hmm. We're all trying to drive efficiency, but at a certain point, that rubber and the compounding has to improve, and that's where I see that. I think you're going to continue to see manufacturers come out with bigger, bolder options, to increase productivity. I think you're going to continue to see them, figure out ways to reduce, the maintenance cost as well. So I think when there's probably some specialized markets I'm not thinking about, but equipment's getting bigger,
Yeah.
Tracks help that.
Max, what about you? We do this segment on this show called "What's Your BDE?" Your Big Dog Energy, and what it means is, what's the moment you show so much passion and knowledge about tracks? What was a moment in your career where you went, "This is what I'm going to do. This is where I want to be. I want to be maybe with RTS or just in the track industry, the ag compact industry." Was there a moment for you?
Sure. I don't know that I can take it back to, one singular moment. But you're right, Joe. It starts with that purpose. Yeah. What's my why? Yeah. Why am I doing this? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Can I get behind the mission of the industry? Can I get behind the mission of my business? Yeah. And from that, it turns into passion, right? That's the fire, and that's the energy. And, it really starts, it goes back to, delivering that customer experience. Did I help somebody today? Yeah. Did I provide a solution? Did I add value, right? And there's so many different ways you can measure that, but you find fulfillment in exercising your passions, right? And this is an industry that's not just an industry to be an industry, but it's a tool that's useful for elevating and creating industries as well, right? So it helps construction. If a guy has a broken track, he's gonna have a bad day.
Yeah.
Can I help him on that bad day? A farmer wants to increase his yield. Can I help him do that? Somebody just needs inventory. Can I help him do that? And so just your solution doesn't matter if somebody doesn't have a problem, right? You don't know what the problem is until you start asking questions.
Yeah. You share a lot of commonalities with most of our guests, which is their passion behind equipment. And we talk about Class 8 trucks to 500, 900 horsepower pieces of ag equipment on the show. it's all about solutions. It's all about finding something that helps that end user accomplish what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, you bet. And I think that's, one thing I really like about Rubber Track Solutions is we carry all the major brands. We've worked with manufacturers. We've went through the quality control process. We've figured out what works, what doesn't work, and we've been able to, figure out, the domestic side of things and figure out how to, ultimately not just create an industry, but elevate an industry.
Max, I don't really have much more for you. John?
I got one more, actually. I was thinking about how does retreading play a part in both tracks and the undercarriage? And do you see it playing a bigger part 5 years from now?
That's a great one.
Yeah, so sustainability is going to have to be part of any industry, right? Especially the day and age that we live in. For undercarriage, it's a big deal. You got a piece of steel. The steel doesn't necessarily wear out in one life. It's just, basically the coating that goes on it, whether it's rubber or polyurethane. That's a big deal, right? You do a core exchange program. When it comes to retreading of tracks, there's such a variability in how people build tracks that I think a fully molded track is probably not a super sustainable, retreaded product. There's if you can replace the tread bars and the guide blocks and, basically, there's not too many broken cables, you can retread it. We call that remanufacturing process, and it basically would go back through, original manufacturing process and be a viable product in the market.
Max, I think you brought a ton of knowledge to our listeners and myself personally. Would love to see you guys come back, bring Jerry on the show, hear a little bit more of the history of RTS. For our viewers out there, put your comments in the comment section. We want to hear more track questions. We'll ping you, Max. Hopefully you can help answer those for us. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Well done, guys.
Till next time.
Around the Bead podcast, tire talk for trucking, mining, agriculture, and more. Your home for fleet solutions, aiming to inform, pioneer, and entertain the tire world in connected industries. Sponsored by East Bay Tire, keeping essential industries moving forward.